All right, so I'm making this after I got all this put back together to kind of illustrate some things I learned from this, things I would do different, and some of the pieces I wish I would have had instead. So here we have the first gen non-intercooled 12 valve power steering pump and vacuum pump. Now the gear here is pressed onto the shaft, and there's an eccentric in there that has bearings that actuates these two diaphragms. Now it is possible to get this on and off of there without pulling these diaphragms off, because there are more seals in here and it's more work, but it's sort of a pain in the ass, which I'll show in the video. A couple things I learned from this. Number one, you're going to need a 12 by 2 or a 14 by 2 bolt. Also, you're going to need some sort of a pusher. Now, what I came up with here, this is an old thread extractor that's hardened, and then I used a piece of a Durango caliper bolt. So this will go down inside the barrel. This is what you'll push off of, and then your bolt will push off of that using the threads inside this this gear. So once you get all that taken apart, that's the easy part. You're going to need to replace the O-ring inside there, which is a number 128. This is not it, but it's close to this. It's a number 128. It's 1.5 outside, 1 11/16 inside, 3/32. It has to be that size. Otherwise, you're going to end up trying to use your Chinese O-ring kit, and it's going to have the exact size, but it's going to be 1/8, and it's not going to work. It's going to roll over on itself, and it's just not going to work. Go buy the O-ring, because you're going to want to have all this stuff here before you get started. Now, the second thing is that you're going to need studs to press this thing back on. It's actually squeezing it back on. So this is a 3/8 16 pitch stud. Now, what I wish I would have done was get longer studs. These are 3-inch. I wish I would have got 4-inch. And also look for the ones that don't have the black oxide coating. You want either a zinc or some sort of different plating on it, because this coating actually galls up the threads. Now, another problem I ran into was I only had these thin nuts, which I use for batteries, for solar stuff. So that wasn't ideal. Now, you're probably thinking, oh, just go to town. Well, it's about 45-mile round trip, and gas is $5 a gallon, and my car gets about 14 miles a gallon. So it's not really economical for me to just go to town and buy something. So I ended up destroying a bunch of nuts. Actually destroyed all 4 of these studs. Another thing you're going to need is a very thick set of washers, probably at least 2, because you're going to be forcing on this. So the stud goes in, then you put your washers on. Bird, what are you doing? And then your nut turns on this and forces the gear back onto the snout. So what you want is a nut that has deep threads and a wide footprint, so it doesn't end up like this, just basically destroying itself and, getting stuck on there. So these studs, I'm just gonna throw them back in my, miscellaneous hardware pile. But that's what you're gonna want to think about before you start doing this. So you can do all this stuff by yourself. You don't need to send it out to machine shop. It's totally doable, but these are just some of the things I learned. You're going to want, and so these bolts, these 14-2s, you can just get these off eBay. I think I paid $10 for 4 of them or something. These are also the same size bolts that you use on a Cummins brake caliper. Bird, what are you doing? Okay. All right, we have a 90 350 Cummins here, non-intercooled. So what I wanted to show here was this one needed a power steering pump. It just lost pressure. Somebody had put the fluid that you put in Hondas in it. It's like a mineral-based fluid in it. Progressively got worse over time, so we're going to put a pump in this thing. But so there's 2 different styles on this. First, this is the non-intercooler version. The charge comes right off the turbo, right into the air horn there. And that uses a vacuum pump, and the power steering pump is bolted directly to it, and it shares a drive gear. Second version is the intercooled version, which is probably what everybody else has, and the most commonly referred to one out there, where it just basically unbolts from the vacuum housing, and there's a little spline drive that goes in there. So this one has just one vacuum port coming off of it, and your standard power steering hoses. But basically, it just bolts to the front of the motor there with 2 bolts right there. So the top bolt is easy to get to. The bottom one is a pain in the ass. It's a 15, I think, or yeah, I want to say it's a 15. You'd figure it'd be metric, right? Because it's a Dodge. But so basically, what I did was I took a 5/8 down there and a 15, which is what's on here now, and so I just was able to use an extreme angle extension here to get the socket on there, because basically the bolt comes directly off of it and directly into this, so there's not really a lot of room to get stuff in there, as you can kind of see here. But so what I want to talk about here is these are the 4 bolts that hold this thing on here, but this drive gear is basically pressed on there. So what you need is a bolt that'll go in here. Now this is a 14x2. I just bought these off of the eBay, you know, no big deal. Just it's a bolt, you just buy it. I don't know if you have one of these floating around. This is also what they use in calipers on the newer Cummins. But so what we have to do here, I believe, is we have to stick something down in there and then use the bolt to basically force the thing off. And it looks like it actually has threads. Wow, look at that. Okay, so I guess that's how we're going to press it back on. So these are 3/8 studs, 3/8 by 16, I believe. These are pretty standard for old school exhaust manifolds and stuff like that. So what we need to do is, I don't know what we need to do. I'm going to go back and read through the forum post again, and then come back with a better idea. All right, so here's the old forum post from Diesel Truck Resource. This is from 2007. So basically, it just talks about pulling it out. There's the stud, and he's just basically talking about dropping a stud. Well, he's using a stud or some sort of a pin down in there, and then using the screw, the bolt, right, to basically force it off. And you can see here he's just got that little stud hanging out there. There's the forcing stud, and you can see how his bearing came apart. That's the reason why he ended up doing this. So I'm hoping that our bearing is in good shape still, because I really don't want to have to order more parts for this thing. Okay, so here's what I came up with. I had an old extractor, broken bolt remover. I hate using these things. It's just been sitting in my toolbox. It's used, it's rounded out, it's hardened. So I kind of was just, messing around here, and this fits right. These threads are rolled on here, right? So it's a little bit of a cup inside here for that to hold on to. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop that down in that hole. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little molybdenum mollygraph. This is a engine assembly lube. It doesn't have to be this. You can use whatever you want. Put a little dip on there. And then I'm just going to put some on these threads. This is going to lessen the friction on the threads. Okay. Put that there like that. Then what I'm going to do is I need to put a little bit of an extension in there, because that is not quite long enough. All right, so it's impossible to see, but that hardened little stud is just barely at the flush with the threads for the shaft. So I ended up having to make an extension. Now this is just a brake caliper pen for a Durango, I think. It's about 1 inch long, and so it tapered the end so it goes down inside the radius inside. You'll be able to see what it looks like later when it gets apart. But I'm just going to drop that in there like that. And then we're going to put our bolt in. And then we're going to give this thing a couple whacks and see what it does, see what happens. Now I can already hear you warriors, you're the guy right there I'm talking to, run into the screen saying, you shouldn't use your impact on that. Just shut up. Do it yourself. Do it your own way. Leave me be. Tired of all the experts running to the keyboard all the time that don't know what they're talking about. Wow, look at that. Isn't that amazing? Okay, so now we can see more of what we're dealing with here. Here is the extension, and you can see down in there, that's the threaded shaft for the installation of the pulley. You can see that hardened piece is stuck down in there, so I'm gonna have to flip that around and dump it out after I take the bolts off for this power steering pump. So these are the vacuum pumps, in case you don't know. These create the vacuum for the brake booster, because not all of them had Hydro Boost back then. And also some of them had rear wheel anti-lock, but you know, that's not what we're here to talk about. So there's these little plungers in there on both sides that ride on the eccentric here on this gear. And then there's a bearing here. Ooh, look at that, Romania. Ooh. All right, so I'm going to get this pump off of here, and then we'll come back when we're getting ready to put that gear back on. So nothing remarkable, just 4 bolts. You don't need me to show you how to take out 4 bolts. All right, so just test fitting this all together here to make sure I got everything right. You will have to extract the studs out of the old one and reuse the spacers. The problem is there's an O-ring in between these 2 housings here, and the O-ring I have is slightly too thick. Now this is a number 128 O-ring. It's a 1 1/2 outer diameter and 1 11/16 inner diameter, but it has to be a 3/32. The ones I got are 1/8, which is just too big. So I'm going to stop here for the night because I'll have to go into town to get the O-ring. And this is what it looks like. So 128, 1 1/2, 1 11/16, which is a standard, it's just a standard O-ring. But I didn't anticipate needing this because I figured, I don't know what I figured. I figured wrong. What I should have figured was that I should have figured that I needed it anyway. So we're going to stop here for the day until I get an O-ring. And I might as well just replace any of these other O-rings, which there really isn't any at all. There is this seal that seals the pump to the case cover there, but we're not going to replace that today. So yeah, that looks like about it for now. We'll be back in the morning. Okay, so ran into a little bit of issue with the O-ring. If you got one of these cheap Chinese one size fits all kits, it's this one, but it's the wrong diameter. This is an 1/8 and you need 3/32. So I got a hold of Tacoma Screw, which is just locally here, and so here's the part number I got from the O-ring 193-383-1. So here's the old one, here's the new one. So I kind of just tried for the hell of it to see if I could get one of the Chinese junk ones in there yesterday, and this is what happens. I knew this is what's going to happen, but I wanted to record this anyway. So the O-ring is too thick; it won't go into the grooves, and so when you press the bolts in, it cuts it, pushes it, cuts it off. So I'm going to take this back apart, put the right O-ring in it, and then we'll proceed with pressing that gear back on. Okay, so here's what I got. Probably should have done some measuring or something, but that's not usually how I do things. I usually just kind of shoot from the hip and see what I got. So these are the studs that I was going to use. I should have got, these are 3 inches. Should have got 4 inches. Not a big deal. It still screws in quite a ways. It's still got, I don't know, 4 threads. So what we're going to do here is we're going to screw this guy down in there as far as we can. And then I'm going to take a washer, flat washer like that, and then I got these nuts that are like, I don't know, they're half nuts. I use these for batteries and stuff. So I'm going to put a little dab of this stuff on there, trying to lessen the friction on the threads. And most of these washers will have a flat spot that's flatter than the other side. I'm going to go ahead and put that down like that. And then we're just going to use this guy, see what happens. Now I'm not going to give it the beans. I'm just going to do this nice and easy. Ooh, okay. Okay, so the other thing we got to watch out for is this eccentric is going to hit these pump rods, actuation rods in there. So pay attention to that too. Oh, okay. We're getting close to touching. Okay, so we're getting close to hitting the vacuum pump arms. Now I may be forced to break these loose and pop the pumps off, which is not what I want to do, but I'm going to see if I can get something down in there to push on them, because I really don't want to have to take all this stuff apart, because there's more O-rings inside here, and I don't really want to have to go back to town to get more O-rings. God, Scotch broom outside. Just gonna check these, make sure that these threads aren't pulling. Yeah, it's just spinning on that. It's not what I wanted it to do. But we really don't have many options here. Okay, try this again. Okay. See if I can get a screwdriver down in there. Beep. Okay. Neat. You got me just like that. Get this one sometime. Vacuum figures. Okay. So the actuator rods in here have it tapered into them, so we're just barely touching the bearing. The bearing has a race on it, and then that tapered end is pushed on it. So we're just gonna put this in a little bit more, and we should be fine. Okay, I just put a little pry action on to make sure that it's not bound up. Okay. I don't know if this is even worth it with this stupid camera, but see down inside here where that screwdriver tip is, that's the little rod, and there's a tapered end on it that rides up on this bearing here. So as this spins, that eccentric on the bearing is what actuates those rods. So we're gonna go ahead and send her home here and see what happens. Man, that just really don't like that. I really don't like how that's. He's just destroying this washer. Too much friction. Wish I had a bearing or something to. See, now these two pieces are one piece now. So I have multiple of these. I'm going to go ahead and just grab another one. And we're going to clean this up. Okay, this one looks like it's a little bit stretched, so we're going to use another one. Come on. Perfect. Split my 20-year-old socket. And that, kids, is why you don't use an impact on a hardened socket, right? And yes, it's true, you should use an impact on one of these, but this socket was bought in 2002. It's now 2022. So, not really that disappointed. I'm just glad I got that nut off. So now I gotta go see if I can find how close this is supposed to be. Alright, so here's what I got. I found an old 3/8/16 nut. Ran a tap through it to clean it up. This was I think this is an old Dodge exhaust manifold bolt, it looks like, probably. It's got that red color to it like it was hot, so I'm assuming it was an exhaust bolt. So we're going to give this a shot. Okay, first thing we're going to do is back this stud out a little bit. Okay, so typical fashion, camera died right in the middle of that, but you didn't miss anything spectacular. Now this this gear gets pressed all the way down until it stops. Now that's kind of hard to tell when it stops because, you know, you're impacting on a screw and you don't really know. So what we'll do here is I'll just stick this in there and measure it real quick. So it looks like it's about 185 thou of clearance there. And you'll be able to see down in the barrel where the snout will be touching the bottom. So didn't really miss anything there. Just ruined another stud, but that's not a big deal. These were like $3 for a set of 4 on eBay, so I'm just going to clean these up and throw them back in my hardware pile. But I did end up finding a nut that had a bigger flange on it and deeper threads, so it didn't end up pulling out like this one. Not a huge deal. Next time I'm going to get some non-oxide coated studs that are 4 inches, which will give me a lot more foot. And so this is the washers I ended up using. These are I want to say these are probably control arm bushing washers from a Jeep, you know, just stuff that I had laying around. You can see even this one got a little dished, but yeah, basically just press it on there until it quits, and then make sure your nuts are tight. So I got the seal back on. We're just going to use the original seal, and I'm just going to stick this thing back in here. So what I'm going to do is kind of drop it in there, put the top bolt in first, get it all situated, and then put the bottom bolt in last because that's kind of a pain in the ass. So I'm not really going to film that part, but we'll come back when the thing's sitting in there. Alright, got the pump mounted in there. That wasn't really too spectacular. It's just 2 bolts. The one in the bottom's a pain in the ass. But I put some fluid in it. I have a special tool I made here. This is an old cap that I drilled a hole all the way through and put a fitting on so I can use this to suck the bubbles out, because there's nothing worse than doors creaking on their own. Nothing worse than trying to start one of these and have it seize up immediately. I've had that happen on a couple second gens before, which is strange. A day ago. Okay, let's stick that in there. Okay, then I have this hooked up to my Mighty Vac. It's just a vacuum pump. What we're gonna do is suck the air bubbles out of it. Well, we're gonna try to anyway. Okay, that sucked it down quite a bit. It was basically up here to this neck, and now it's down to the bottom. So basically what we're doing is we're using the vacuum pressure to suck the air bubbles out so that the fluid can go in, so that the pump is not dry when it starts, and also we don't get a whole bunch of cavitation in the pump immediately, because I don't want to burn this thing up, because I don't want to do this again. Okay, now we're down to the level of the pump housing. Okay. Now what we're going to do is fall over. I'm going to put the cap back on. This is unusual. This one doesn't actually have a seal on it like that one does. Got the battery put in. Pretty unremarkable there. So we're going to go ahead and start this thing and see what it does. They don't build them like they used to, that's for sure. It's for a buddy of mine. He does forestry work. Pretty cool rig. Anyway, that's it. I got the we got power steering now, and we learned something, I'm sure. So I also got the video on the brakes. That one's going to be coming out here soon as well. So that's it for this one. It's probably going to be a fairly long video, but it is what it is.